There's nothing greater than life, you know. And when you see that taken from you in 5 seconds, it does something to you. It makes you weep for a little bit, but then it gives you so much more joy. It gives you so much more tenacity. It gives you so much more life. It gives you so much more reason to live, you know. And it's like Paul said it in, there's a real big echo in this microphone. In Philippians, it talks about, Philippians 1, I think it's in 21 or something. It says, for me to live is what? Is Christ. For me to die is what?
Gain.
Is gain. There's no difference between life and death. That's the good news. There is no difference between your life today and the death that you will face in one time. Because either way, what's the Bible say? Either way, if you live, it's who? It's Christ, which is a what?
Gain.
It's a gain, right? Greatest thing I ever did in my life was when I was 16, I gave my heart to Christ and I said, this is yours. It's your property. It's yours. I gained something. So then if it says what? To die is what? Is that same gain. I mean, that's our testimony. You know, that's where it stands. We tasted death a lot closer than most people. But when you tasted it, you realize that it was the same as your life. You know. So we're just going to try to get through it as much as we can. Do you want me to do something else with this mic? What should I do, guys? Is it good? They're telling me to put it up further. Good? I love talking with sound guys. In Haiti, we used to do a lot of it. Me and my dad used to do a lot of sound work, so I love you guys up there. You have anything you want to say before we start?
Yeah, I guess.
Is that one good?
Can you guys hear me? Just in the nutshell, before we say the actual events, is just something God kept reminding me that He is a good God. He is a good God and He's a sovereign God. We don't understand His ways, but we can always know that He is a good God. I guess all the rest will come out as we say our story, so we'll start. It was a beautiful, beautiful sunny day, a Tuesday. We had been there a week and one day. We were planning to be there for 3 months. For those of you who don't know, Rodney lived there for about 20 years with his family. They had a few small businesses, and the church, the cell group church, came from that. So Rodney moved back to the States in 2005.
For her.
For me. And so we decided, we were feeling it for about a year to just go back to Haiti just for 3 months. He was going to help his adopted brother, Gims, a Haitian that was living at the house that he grew up in. He was going to help him with the ministry school, which is a 2-month school where...
2.5.
2.5-month school. So it was the second day of ministry school. Rodney, it was his turn to introduce the class and get things started. He had announced it on the radio in Haiti, so there was, we think, 42 students in the class that day. So the second day, he didn't really know a lot of them. There was a handful of his church family that was involved, but a lot of it was community people that were in the school. So it was the second day of school, and it started at 3 o'clock. They were 2 hours into the school. It's 5 o'clock. Jeremiah and I had just woke up from our naps. I was getting ready to prepare dinner, gave Jeremiah a bath, and Rodney came upstairs. We still don't really know why he came up. He came up and asked if I want to email or use the computer, and we're going to switch here. So yeah, where was I? Oh yeah. Rodney came up to ask if I want to use the computer, and that in itself, just looking back, there was so many things that God was directing us in order to spare our lives. He came up because I hadn't, looking back, I know I didn't ask for the computer. I'm not sure why he did. He came up to see if I would like to email. I said no, so he laid it on the kitchen table. We were on the second floor of the house. The ministry school was on the first floor. Do you want to explain the house a little bit?
Yeah, we have, how many of you have been to Haiti? Is there a lot of people, a lot of hands? Wow. So basically, all of you who have been to Haiti, tell the person next to you how it is, and then we can just give them, no. They build with concrete, okay? Everything is block walls, poured concrete. The roofs themselves are pure concrete with rebar, all the way back and forth. So they probably pour like a 4 to 5 inch, more like 6 to 7 inches of pure concrete, and those are the roofs, and then you have a roof, and then you have your walls basically as partitions and stuff. So we had 3 stories of this. It's probably a 50 by 75 is what our area was. And every time you go up, you go out an extra 2 feet. You go up, you go out an extra 2 feet. Okay, so by the time you're this 4th floor, we have a flat roof. So there's actually, you're on the 4th floor there. You're up pretty high. You're up a good probably 40 feet or so. So there's a lot of weight, tremendous amount of weight in these structures. So we have the first floor is where we had our church and our ministry school. So then there would be the first floor, and then there would be a roof poured. And then back in 96, we started building a second story, okay? So we put up walls, and then we poured another roof. And in that second story would be in our house where we lived, where we were staying at the time. And then the third, back in 2004, I think it was, when we built a 3rd floor, okay? Put up the walls, put a small apartment in there for the Haitian pastor that's running our ministry, which would have been Gimson and Sophie. And they lived there. And then we had another roof. Okay? So in between the school where the 42 students were, there was 1, 2, 3 roofs that just, so that's how it was. So we were in the second floor, so that means there would have been 2 concrete slabs. 50 by 50 by 50 concrete slabs over top of us.
We just had talked for a little bit, and another just a small miracle. As Rodney was coming up the stairs, he grabbed Jeremiah. The week that we were there, Jeremiah was warming up to the people a lot, and they had him a lot in the building somewhere, but he wasn't with me nearly all the time. So anyway, he grabbed Jeremiah before he came and asked me about the computer. Laid it on the table. I turned to go back to our bedroom, and he turned around, and that's when there was absolutely no warning. The house it was crazy. The concrete house just started to shake. I turned around, and I remember looking on the kitchen wall, and everything was falling off the wall, and these walls were shaking. And then I remember screaming for Rodney. He screamed for me, and we were able to get to each other. It was shaking bad that you weren't able to really walk steady at all. But we were able to get to each other, met, and went down. Just everything crashed.
And how we fell, we weren't, get your hand and go like this, put it in front of your face, and look at it. That's how everything, well, you guys look really funny, by the way. that's how it looked. And you were looking around, and everything is just, it's like in fast motion. And then all of a sudden you feel the floor from underneath you it didn't open up, remember, because it's a concrete slab. Okay, it's a whole concrete slab that you're standing on. And what happened is it just dropped. Because the walls that were holding it up, the support beams that were holding up this concrete ceiling, they were shaken. And so all of a sudden, this 40-foot building just sandwiched into 10 feet. Okay, you guys getting the picture? It just totally, it didn't go sideways, or it didn't, go off to the side. It just went from here to just like that. And so we were standing there, and that's what threw us to the ground. It's kind of like an elevator. If you're in an elevator and all of a sudden it doesn't work and it just starts dropping. That's the feeling that we had. So then when it dropped, and the force of it hitting the first floor is what threw us to the ground. So we're on the ground, and there's probably 2 feet at the most, like 1.5 feet of space. There's rubble all over. It's you can hardly see. Jeremiah screaming, and all of a sudden it's dust. It's just like this heavy, thick dust that you can hardly even breathe, because it's concrete. It's dried blocked. It's been there for the past 20 years, and this stuff, it just all crumbles with the weight of these 3. I don't know how many tons of concrete just coming down all on top of it and squishing it. So she's laying there. I'm looking at her, and I remember seeing the tiles of our house pop up, jump up, just from everything shaking. You're seeing the tiles. You're seeing the fan, the ceiling come. Just come right down. And I remember chuckling to myself, saying, "This is it." This. I can't.
I wasn't chuckling.
It's like I can't. It had happened in 2004. We had a pretty big shake, and I was standing in the exact place. So it's kind of like a deja vu. But then once the wall started just busting and blowing up, and then this roof started coming down, I'm like, this isn't a deja vu. This, I can't believe my house is collapsing, and I'm in the middle of it, with my son in my arms and my wife.
It was a matter of seconds, because I don't even remember really the actual fall or what I was thinking. But we were down, and soon after we were thrown to the floor with, we couldn't even sit up. There was, I don't know how much space. We were squished underneath, and the earth didn't stop shaking. That was, I guess, for me, probably the scariest thing, being under there and still feeling the earth just tremble underneath. So Rodney just started saying, "Jesus, we're ready. We're coming." And I guess that's the feeling, that's just the closest feeling to death, to thinking you're going to see Jesus soon. And that's just another small testimony. I don't fear death anymore, knowing that that's what it is. You were so close to seeing him. So he started praying that. I started praying that the earth would just still, that God would still the earth. And the ceiling kept coming down on us a little bit as the earth would shake. It kept kind of just coming down a little bit. So Rodney got me to lay flat on my back and take Jeremiah and start to nurse him to keep him quiet. And we heard people underneath us, right underneath us.
And yeah, you heard, like I heard Gimps. I heard Gimps yelling, people's names. I heard, people that I've grown up with. They're just screaming. It was amazing to hear the shifts of emotions. The first initial crash, you just heard everyone screaming each other's names. Where are you? Because no one could see anything. And then it kind of stopped shaking a little bit, and then it started shaking again, and it started coming down further. And you heard the people yelling, "Jesus, Jesus, in the name of Jesus, just let's Father," and praying. And then the last time before it quit, it shook again. And that's when it kind of just went from, we're getting out of here, to this is it. And just the screams and the yells. And there's testimonies of some of the live people that we pulled out. There was different people that they say that they were possessed with demons. One guy was underneath their pin screaming, and he said that if I'm gonna die, I'm not gonna die alone. And he grabbed the rock and just, took the life of the guy next to him that was laying there. So there was so much that was going underneath that, and we heard it because they were right beneath us. Next.
Yeah. Soon after, then the shaking started to settle down. It was completely black. I couldn't see anything, but Rodney saw a small light. The only reason I couldn't see it is because he was blocking it from, like, he was in front of the light. So he started speaking hope right away, and that's really, I think, what kind of kept my mind just hopeful and okay. He said he sees a small light. He's gonna start to see if he can get out of here. So
and the whole time she was like, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." She can hardly see in the dark, So she was holding on to my foot, and you don't have much room to work when. I know, because it's like you want to grab a rock and throw it behind you, but she was right there, So it was this claustrophobic feeling that, where do you put the rubble? How do you dig yourself out of a hole that you have to put it somewhere else? So I remember taking pieces and taking them and kind of like laying stone, putting it strategically in a section and just taking piece by piece and putting it in, because I knew if I just take it and throw it, I don't know when we're getting out, So it was like each piece of rubble, there was stuff that was too big. I remember having to break with my hands. I remember having to break with my knees, just elbows, just anything, because you had to get you. And this light that was in front of you, this tiny bit of light from the outside, I was like, it was just my spirit was like, you have to get to that. That is your lifeline. I knew it was 5 o'clock. And I knew within a matter of minutes, maybe half an hour to maybe an hour, it would have been dark. And then, how are you gonna find your way out of this in the dark? We could have never get out. So this light was just go to it, So we did everything we could. We kept digging. Every time I'd get ahead a little bit, then she'd hand Jeremiah to me, and we go through.
What happened soon then? He found an area that was a little roomier where I could sit up half decent and keep feeding Jeremiah. So there was a small hole that he had to kind of squirm through. Then I had to give Jeremiah to, and then he had to pull me through. And that was where we saw Jeremiah's pack and play, another miracle, because it was filled with blocks. It was still kind of standing, but it was full of blocks, yeah. So we got to this open area, and he just kept kind of going from there. And it was a fear of mine that we were going to still be separated, that something was going to shift and there was going to be a huge piece of concrete between us. So I would hang on to him, and he would go as far as he could, and then he'd scoop me up and keep going. So we were doing that. He was doing that for, we think, 30 to 45 minutes. A Haitian that was out on the streets and saw the house fall was able to run quite a few blocks, 12 to probably 15 blocks, and back again, and then saw us walk out. Yeah, it took a few places. So he thinks it was about 30 to 45 minutes. So we were able to get out.
And I remember Jeremiah, he's such a little trooper. Where you at, buddy? I mean, he was crying, yes. I remember when we would have to, the tunnel that you'd build was so small that you couldn't hand him. She couldn't hand him to me, so she had to kind of like throw him through the tunnel a little bit so I could grab his arms. And I remember one time just grabbing hold of his arms and just pulling him, and just over the rocks, over the rubble, just scraping, over his chest, and just being, just, sorry, buddy. But and I can see his eyes just screaming, ah, and I pulled him, and I got him, and we just comforted him a little bit, and then I had to set him off to the side because then I had to get his mom, then pulled the mom through. Lillian had to lay on her back and kick with her feet as I pulled her through. But each spot was a phase. I remember we dug through something, and then all of a sudden I see that same light that I was going to, I see another light. And just something inside my heart said, go to that light. And then, bam, changed direction, started going through that light. We ended up coming out through the third floor. So I don't know how we went through the roof that was above us. Somehow we got through that, and we were able to come out on the third floor a good 30 to 45 minutes after the quake. And then coming out, I remember just standing up and just looking around, and the devastation that was there was just everything that you've known from little up was flattened. It was just, and people screaming, just the yells, the screams, and people that were on the streets gathering around. So we got out.
I need to say this story because it's the only little happy, kind of romantic part of the whole thing coming out. He was pulling me out. It was one of the times when we were going from a really tight spot to a more open spot, and I was laying on my back, and he was pulling me out by my hands, not my arms, my hands, and I felt my rings slip. I didn't realize he had a hold of them, but I felt my rings slip. I don't know how many of you guys watch the Rocky movie series, but there's a part in there where he tells his wife Adrian, he says, "I ain't ever leaving you, baby.
You ain't never getting rid of me."
That's what it is. You ain't ever getting rid of me. Well, he used to ever since we watched the Rocky movies, that was his little phrase to me. So anyway, he was pulling me out, and my ring slipped off, and I must have gasped.
She panicked. Her face. I was like, "We're in an earthquake, woman. We almost died." And her ring, so it was funny for me because I knew exactly why she got all white and panicked. It's because here she's losing her wedding rings in this earthquake,
So anyway, he got the rings, put them on, and said, "You ain't ever getting rid of me, baby." And then we kept trying.
But things like that, they're so real. In the midst of death, there is life, Even in the midst, like in that, we were dying. Basically, I had no clue if we were getting out. But yet, if your heart is ready, death is the same as life. You know what I mean? And your response is going to be the same. Your love is going to be the same. That's why the Christian that is born again, that has given his heart to God and said, "This is not my property, it's yours." It's not a situation, it's not a circumstance that dictates to him how he reacts. He reacts the same way every time because of the power of God that's in him. And even in the midst of this death, you just, we tell each other these stories, and you see over and over and over again how God, he is strong. He's ready to move. He doesn't look at death and life in any difference. We're the ones who look at it and we're scared of it. We're the ones who shy away from it. But those who have their hearts set on God and who have laid it all down, you don't live any different. There's no difference in it.
So yeah, we got out, and it was dusk. It got dark pretty quickly after that, and we found there was 3 other people that got out without any help. So as soon as we got out, we really, honestly, we had a few scratches. Jeremiah had a tiny scratch on his cheek. It is a pure miracle how we got out not even wounded. There's so many people that, amputations, it's horrible. So we got out, and Rodney found kind of a safe spot for me. There was an intersection right by their house, so I found a spot there. The streets were chaotic. People were people were losing it. They were going crazy, running and screaming because it was everywhere. And Rodney he knew there was people still in the house, so he went right back. I'm going to let you explain. He went right back and started working at getting people out of there. There was another thing we didn't mention. The floor above us, there was an English class going on. So we think there was 54 to 58 people in the house total. So the floor above us, there was five English students and the teacher. So he immediately went there to help them get out.
Because they were on the top floor, so I knew if there was anybody that we can get out as quick as possible, you go to the people who were on the top floor. But the things you see. There was a little kid, probably 15, 16 years old, little tattoo. I'm on top of the roof. I'm looking around, just trying to see what's the next move. You know, where do I go from here? And he comes running up to me, and he's like, "Rodney, I hear people stuck over here. Come look." And we go up to it, and there's a small passageway, probably about a foot wide, that you can stick your head underneath and see. And there's the 5 English students. You know, there was a lady that was crushed on top of the desk. Her glasses still on her eyes, her pencil still in her hand, and the English book opened up in front of her, and she's just, eyes still open, dead right away. There was another man that was back further that was still alive, but he couldn't move. His body was just crushed. There was the teacher of the English class she was the first one closest to that small crack that we were able to look in through, and her leg, she was flat. She was flat on her belly with things with the roof on her like this, so she could not move. She had nothing that she could move, and the only way that we were able to loosen her was by pushing her leg this way. And so we had to break her leg to just release the pressure so that we could pull her out. And then that opened up a cavity, where her body was, that was a cavity. And then I could crawl into that cavity and work on this other lady. Another lady had the table, those metal folding tables. They have the plywood on the top, and then they have that metal ring around the bottom of it. Her head was smashed into that. Half of her head was just almost embedded in that table. And I know, so I got down into that. Yeah, but back to the story of the young 15-year-old. You look, there's no way that you can get anyone out of that small area. And I was just like, well, what do we do? And this little 15-year-old guy, he comes up, he says, someone gave me a hammer. I yelled, I said, I need a hammer. And a hammer, within 5 minutes or so, a hammer came, but it's a little carpenter hammer with a wooden hammer. And you're looking at this thing, and you're looking at the 6 inches of concrete that you got to bust through, and you're like, So we start hitting it, bam, bam. Within the first probably about 4 or 5 hits, boom, the handle breaks, and then you yell, we need another hammer, and another hammer comes. You start working at it, and you see the impossible of the task. And this 15-year-old, I remember just standing back and just looking, trying to think, okay, how can I intelligently do this, and get him out as quick as possible, because with this little hammer, it's not going to happen that quick. But I remember this little kid just saying, Rodney, we can do it. And he grew up with us from way little, little kids say, remember what you guys used to always say, we can do this, let's work at this. And he grabbed the hammer from me. I've never seen strength, and then he starts hitting it. He just probably 2 feet from where the crack was, just hitting it, screaming, just hitting it. We can do this. And he hit it. This 15-year-old kid, he opened it up, cracked it up enough that we could break off a section of it, And it's amazing, the seeds that you sow into people's lives. You have no clue when they're going to show up. You have no clue when they're going to show up. Sow. Never stop sowing. He who sows sparingly will what? will reap sparingly. The words that we speak into our kids, the words that we speak into our young kids, sow. Because in a time like that, when you feel like you don't know what to do, the very words that you sowed into someone can come back and breathe life to these people. And because of that incident right there, we were able to save 3 people. We gave back 3 people their lives. We pulled the first Root was her name. We pulled her out, and she just crying, screaming, this, and get her out. So that opened up another cavity so we could pull this other lady out. And then the third man that was alive, we pulled him out, but he was basically dead when we pulled him out. As I pulled him out and put him on my back and walked him down off the roof and onto the road, laid him down, and then went back to get some more people. They say within probably a good couple hours, within like an hour or so, he he was dead. And then for the rest of that night and almost the rest of the day, he was laying right there. We slept that night with a dead man just 5 feet from us. Jeremiah was playing around, and there's the dead man, blood all over the place. So after we were able to get rid of all the people that were in the English school, and then the next was there were some neighbors that came running to us, because by then they started seeing that what we were doing was getting people out. So we had a neighbor come running to me and say, Rodney, their house had collapsed. It was a 3-story building, but the second story and third story had stayed intact, and it had just crushed the first floor. So the first floor was probably only 2 feet like this, but somehow there was still a lady that was alive in there. So we worked and pulled her out, laid her in the middle of the street, and then I was like, okay, I gotta go find Gims. I gotta go find. Because I knew that he was still alive. Because I had heard him when we were stuck on top. I'd heard him yelling. I'd heard him asking for people's names. And so I started looking around the house, trying to find a way where I could get down. Could I get down to the first floor somehow, somewhere? And I found a small opening, and I just started digging, started pulling rubble out, making a tunnel down to the first floor. I kept hearing him yelling, kept talking to him. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Stay calm, because they were just screaming, yelling. I'd yell into them. I'd say, guys, listen, I have no clue how long this is going to take. We're not going to let you in there. We're going to come get you. But you have to stay calm, because I had little carpenter hammers in my hand. How are you going to get, how are you going to pull people out of rubble with that little hammer? And I had no clue when the government would start showing up to start helping, or when relief efforts were going to come in. So you'd be telling the people, just save as much of your energy as you can. But I remember being down in there digging that tunnel, getting down to where they were, and there was a piece of wood, probably like almost like a 2x6 or something, and I grabbed it, and right as I grabbed it, I felt it move from the other end. So I yelled, I said, is someone on the other end of this? Can someone move this? And they moved it. So then, yes, energy you just get this adrenaline, and you're like, okay. So you start pulling the rubble out, you start making a way. And what I came to find out is there was probably about a 12-inch space between the roof and the floor of the downstairs. It was flat. The top of the roof was rebar and concrete, so there was no way that we could bust through that. The bottom of it was a tile floor. I made a small opening. There was a man his body was sitting, you could see a bench. There was a bench that was at one time up against the wall. That bench, the legs had been totally flattened, and there was a man sitting on it like this, and his body was just... The roof was on top of his back. The sides of his legs were busted where it had exploded and opened because of the pressure. And so the only way that they could come out was from like an opening from here to maybe about this big. Because right here was like a huge iron and rebar and poured concrete. We could bust through the block walls but you could not get through the rebar and the concrete. So we found that small hole, and there was, I started yelling out people's names, who was there. There's probably about 15 people that were alive. We would yell, we got a relay going, because family members by that time were all outside. Just hundreds of people were outside just screaming, who's alive in there? Who's alive in there? And the whole time you have to know there were aftershocks going on the whole time. Every 10 minutes it'd shake. And those who came out later would say that every time it shook, it would come down closer and closer and closer to them. But we had this small section that we worked. And to open that small section, we probably worked from the time I got out to the time your strength was exhausted. It was probably about a good 8 hours where you were just working. That's all you were doing, was pulling people out, working. To make that tunnel, it took 4 hours until I was able to even get someone out, make it where I could see them. 4 hours. I remember one time saying, I need a chisel, because I needed just to shave off a tiny bit of the bench, because the guy that was coming through couldn't get through. He's like, it's too small. I can't get through here. And you can't break any more. There's not enough equipment. There's nothing. You have nothing to break through. So we'd say, okay, well, take your clothes off, take your belt off. And he came through. He couldn't. He'd get halfway through and just couldn't. He'd get stuck. And they were saying then inside, those who were trapped inside, every time someone would go through the hole, they would have to hold their breaths, because right then the air would be cut and there was no air, because that was the only way that they were getting a little bit of air to be able to breathe. So there was a woman that we saved in there that she was saying all she did the whole time until she came out was she would get the 15 people or so that were in that cavity where she was. She would make sure, okay, he's going in, let's hold our breath, and 1, 2, 3, and they'd hold their breath until he would either come out, or if he was too big or couldn't get through, he would have to be pushed back in, and then we'd have to continue working. Some of the people were too big to get through, so we had to, that bench that was like 2 inches, it was 2 inches high, that was on the floor. It had collapsed. It was probably about 2 inches high. Most of the men got out, but then there was the ladies that were a little bit more heavier, and they couldn't get out. We probably worked a good hour and a half to try to get one lady out. She still could not get out. The only thing that we could do was to take away that 2 inches of bench that was there, because that would have given at least 2 inches and maybe she could come out. I yelled for a saw. I said, I need a saw. Someone brought back, those little hacksaws, those handheld hacksaws? Not the big ones, the little ones that you hold in one hand, you know what I mean? They said, here's a saw. What are you going to do? No, go to Gap Power there, Willie, and get me a good saw. People are screaming, people are saying, Rodney, are you going to get me out? So you grab that little saw, and as you're in this tunnel, you're reaching deep in there, and just with this little hacksaw, trying to cut through this bench. We worked on that bench, good probably 2 hours. Because what are you going to do? You have to use the tools that they give you, that you can't get. Yours are all underneath. Then finally we kept on saying, we worked on with that little saw for probably about 30 minutes, and this is not going to work. Get something else. So then 10 minutes, they went out searching for something. They found it. They found a bigger saw. This saw was totally dull. Couldn't still, worked at it. Then by that time, it's probably 4 or 5 hours into the rescue, and you're starting to feel it. Your energy's failing. You can't work as hard. You haven't been drinking. There's no water. The emotion that's just running through you. We would have to go in shifts. The stench from underneath there now started coming up, because people were sweating, people were peeing themselves, people were pooping in there, and it was just the stench from underneath there that was coming out was just horrible. So we'd have to go in shifts. There was a couple guys, probably about 2 or 3 guys that they would, when I would come up and say, guys, I can't anymore, can you go down? They would say, okay. And they'd go down for they'd go down for 5 minutes and give me a break. And then it'd shake, and you're down in that hole, and then you get an aftershock, and it's like, in between all that time, I'd go back and check on Lillian. Every every 30 minutes, I just go back and make sure she's okay, and have to again renew my promise that I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna do anything stupid. I think I did though. But anyway, we worked till probably about 1:30, and we got 11 people. We got 11 people out that night, and then I had a flashlight, and I went down into the hole, and I hear probably about 4 or 5 people that are still there, and I'm like, "Aren't you guys coming?" And they're like, "We can't." I said, "Do you see the light?" They're like, "Yes, we see the light. We see." I'm like, well, "Can't you crawl? Can't you come?" And they're like, "No, we can't. There's stuff in our way. There's dead people that we can't push away. There's." And I remember when one of them, and because Gimps had not come out, every time a person came out, I was like, maybe it's Gimps. Maybe here comes, my brother, because your adrenaline is for those who you love the most, and that's where I was getting just that strength. Gimps is going to be next. Gimps is going to be next. And then after the 11 people came out, there just there was no one else. I remember yelling in. I said, "Do you guys see Gimps? Is Gimps alive? Is he there?" And one guy yelled out. He says, "Yeah, he's laying right next to me." I'm like, "Well, is he alive?" And they were like, "Yeah, he's breathing he's hardly breathing. He's barely breathing." So that gave me hope. Again, it's like, well, maybe they're like, "But there's a huge door. We can't get to you. There's a huge door that's in the way." And I was like, "Okay, well, we got to move this door." So I started all over. I got out of that tunnel and found where that door was, and started trying to break through this door, trying to get to that other cavity where those guys were. I remember picking up the hammer and starting all over again, and the hammer coming out of my hands. I couldn't hold on to the hammer anymore. I remember getting the post hole digger that we had, and trying to get that to maybe bust through the wood. Every time I'd hit the wood, it would just drop out of my hands. You were spent. There was nothing else you could do. And I remember just laying there and just thinking, okay, this is it. What do I do? I remember saying, "God, you can bring them out. Why can't? Where's that? Where's your power? This is Gimps. Of all the people that should be coming out, he should be coming out, But there was nothing I could do. I remember thinking, well, I left the flashlight there. I left the flashlight shining into the tunnel saying, "Listen, guys, we're going to keep coming back to you at night, keep checking up on you. Maybe tomorrow there'll be hope. Maybe tomorrow someone will come with some heavy equipment or something." And I remember leaving, crawling out of the tunnel, walking off the roof, and stepping onto the street, and just collapsing. It was like you were walking away from the living. You knew that this was it. Whoever was in that house was not coming out, because there was no possible way to get them out. And I think I actually fell over. I think they caught me, and that was the first time that night that you just broke. You just wailed and wailed and wailed and wailed. But it was amazing. As I was wailing, as I was just crying, as I was just realizing my limits, that there was nothing else that I could do to save the one that I loved the most. I remember just the words that were coming out of my mouth. They were in Creole. It was "Bon Dieu vivant," which is God is living. There is a living God. There is a living God. There is a living God. No matter what situation we are in, no matter who lives, no matter who dies, the God that we serve today, he's a living God. And so we just wept. And after that, what was the situation like on the street?
During that whole time, there was a crowd that kind of gathered. Some of his church family and some of the family members who had family members in the house waiting to see if they'd be rescued. So I was kind of in there, and there was a couple of people from his church that were very just amazing, making sure I was always okay. I felt very good with them. It was a long night because of the aftershocks, and then there was when Rodney did finally come back and say he's gonna try and just sleep just for a little bit. Then you started hearing this scream of people in the distance. I don't know how far it was, but it woke Rodney up, and soon people all started standing up and running, and they were saying the tsunami is coming. So we weren't far from the water, and it was just a long night of just a lot of fear and from people everywhere. It was just uneasy. And it was hard to see. Something that was really hard to see was there was a girl there. Her name was Nadej, and the week before she would come over. She had a little son. He was 4 months older than Jeremiah, and the week that we had been there, she'd come over every day to bring her little boy. His name was Kevin, to come and play with Jeremiah. So they were becoming good friends, and she was in the ministry school and had Kevin with her, and she was rescued but heard him crying, and they couldn't get to him. And it was really, really hard to see Rodney bring her out on his back and her just screaming for Kevin. Rodney laid her beside me, and she just clung to my leg and wept, and we actually heard him crying the next morning, yet he was still screaming under the rubble. So there was a lot of it was rough. It was a lot of pain. It was a lot of pain. He didn't say anything about Sophie. Sophie was Gimps's wife. She was in the business at Printmaster when it happened, and she died as well. We don't think she lived very long at all. And just a small testimony of still hearing God's voice at a time like that. I was praying for her, and I just felt soon after it happened that God said, "You don't have to pray for her anymore. It's all right." I'm pretty sure, I just had, it was amazing how his presence was still there, and just spoke things to your heart. So that's what it was. A lot of making room for more wounded as he would pull some out. There was they kind of put him in a section. People would bring sheets and lay them. It was dark. The stars were beautiful, but it was dark, which I'm kind of thankful for, because I didn't see a lot of gory things there, like as the wounded were laying there, because trucks would come by and they'd load them in the truck if they needed to go to the hospital. So by the time the sun came, the sun rose the next morning, a lot of the worst cases were already in hospitals. So you saw the blood on the streets. You knew there was a lot of people that were hurt bad, but I didn't see a lot of that. I think I was kind of spared from seeing all of that. So yeah, it was a long night. I was so ready to see the sunrise, because there was a lot of aftershocks the whole night. So Rodney found a tarp that he laid down, and he used the Bible for his pillow and laid down. We laid down, and somebody threw a sheet over us.
The whole time that we were pulling people out, I was like, okay, I don't know how we're gonna survive, because this is the whole city. So I was going into survivor mode. So I'd see a sheet, I'd grab a sheet, and I'd send it down to our church people. I'd see a chair, I'd send it down. I started stockpiling wood. You started, because you're like, I don't know, you have no clue how long this is gonna be, that you're gonna be living in this situation until, we had no passports, we had no money, we had no clothes, everything was, was just gone. So that's where the sheets would come from. We would, as we were digging people, as we were digging holes and stuff, and we'd see something, we'd send it to the people that were on the road.
So I slept a little bit. I don't think Rodney slept much at all that night. And then morning, he went back to seeing if he could get anybody out with having more light. I don't think he said he did. People brought a few flashlights. That's what they were working with. So he went back to working, and he found Gimps's desk, which had a box of the church's tithe money, and with that he sent some of the girls out to buy some bread and water and some cheese. So we were able to eat something soon the next morning. And
then by this time, people started coming because they had nowhere to go, and the one hope was, maybe at our house. And so we had salvaged a tent, and we set up a tent, and people just were coming from all over, sleeping underneath it, sitting there. And the food, we were able to get the money. So with that money, we were able to, buy spaghetti, buy bread, buy water, and just start to feed just all these people that were starting to come around. It was a lot of them were just community people. They weren't necessarily church people. A lot of them were still waiting to see if their dead could come out. If they're to claim the bodies of their families that were in there. So yeah, we were on the streets for that whole day, just not really knowing what's going to happen. And then someone from another city, another one of our churches, a city of Gonaive, came, and we had helped them back in 2004 when the floods had hit Gonaive. And there again, the seeds you sow, they come back. We had helped that city out in 2004 when the floods had just devastated them. Within the first day, Gimps was the one that had rice on his back. They were walking miles through floods with sacks of rice, 80-pound sacks of rice on their backs to get to these church members, to find these people in Gonaive. And then for the next month or two, we helped them rebuild. We helped them. There was mud in their homes, probably 3 to 4 feet high, and we just, we helped them come back. And sure enough, the next day, who were the first people that came to see who we were, how we were, was these Haitians from Gonaive, this church. And they came, and they came to me and said, "Rodney, what are we supposed to do?" And by that time, I was so physically spent, my mind, I didn't know where we were going to go. I didn't know how we were going to get out of here. I didn't know if you had no plan. And he came and said, "Listen, what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I have no clue." So we just knelt right there in the street and just started praying, and all of a sudden this light came in his eye, and he's like, "I know. I'm going to go back to Gonaive, which is like 4 hours away right now. I'm going to rent a bus. I'm going to come back, and we'll take you guys to Gonaive. Whoever wants to go, we'll rent a big school bus, and whoever of your church, whatever church members that want to go, we'll house them, we'll feed them." So that's what he did. He came back with that bus probably around 12 o'clock at night, and single file. I sent our church people out one by one because we were afraid if we would all go together, everyone in the area, in the neighborhood would see this bus and they'd mob it and, try to everyone get on this bus to leave Port-au-Prince. So Wednesday night, we arrived in Gonaive, and there they gave us clothes, they gave us shoes, they gave us. That church probably, and this is Haiti, they probably put a total of $20,000 into our church. The bus ride itself was about $7,000 just to come 3.5 hours to come pick us up, just because of the situation. People, Haitian, which is probably about $1,000 US. So this church is just amazing to see how that Haitian church just reached out and took us. Even now they're still housing our church, in Gonaive still. They're still feeding them. They're still clothing them.
Our brother-in-law, Rodney's brother-in-law, Ricardo, was able to get a hold of his brother who found me on the street. So I was able to talk a little bit to Ricardo and tell him we're okay. But in my mind, it was amazing because I wasn't sitting there thinking, "Oh man, I need prayer. I hope people are remembering and praying." We were just carried. I didn't realize until I'm here and I hear all of these things and I think back on how I felt, and I know that he was just carrying us through it. You get through times like that.
And it's not over. You know, we still have a lot of things to do. Yes, there is mourning, but there is joy. You know, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And if we cannot step into the awesomeness of who God is, even in a tough situation, there's no way that we'll be able to go back, you know, into a situation like this and be able to bring strength, you know, to be able to bring hope to Him. We are planning on going back Tuesday morning. Our whole family, me, my wife, and Jeremiah will be going back. We just feel it's where we need to be. God's opened tremendous doors. I mean, tremendous doors for us in that community. It's amazing. My dad says it's like seeds. That, you know, our ministry that was crushed, the lives that were lost, the 30-some people that died, they're seeds for what God wants to bring, you know, and it's amazing. But before we give it over to Dathan, we just have a song we want to sing. This song has just been, it's amazing how God prepares you for what you're going to go through. He prepares you. You know, the same God that calls you, what's that say in Romans? The same God who calls you, He equips you, He's ordained you. You know, He knows what He's doing with your life if you give Him your life. He knows. Nothing is coincidence. Nothing is just, oh, really? No, it's not. You know. And this song was it was on Lillian's heart. I'll let you say a little bit about it, babe.
This is my prayer in the desert, when all that's within me feels dry. This is my prayer and my hunger and need. My God is the God who provides. And this is my prayer in the fire, in weakness or trial or pain. More worth than gold, so refine me, Lord,
tonight again.
Yes, this is